The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Windsor Castle as 10-year-old Prince George walked alongside his protection officer toward the main entrance. It was supposed to be a routine day, one of many that blended together in the carefully orchestrated life of a young royal. The boy moved with the practiced ease of someone who had grown up surrounded by security protocols and watchful eyes. Officer James Mitchell had been assigned to Prince George's detail for nearly 2 years. At 34, he was considered one of the most reliable members of the Royal Protection Squad. His military background and sharp instincts had earned him the trust of the royal family, and more importantly, the comfortable familiarity of the young prince himself. George had grown to see Mitchell not just as a bodyguard, but as a friendly presence in his highly structured world. The castle buzzed with its usual morning activity. Staff members moved efficiently through the corridors, preparing for the day's scheduled events. Prince George was expected to attend a brief photo session with visiting dignitaries before joining his siblings for afternoon lessons. The routine was so familiar that everyone involved could perform their roles almost automatically. As they approached the ornate doorway leading to the staterooms, Prince George suddenly stopped walking. Mitchell, who had been scanning the area with his trained eye, noticed the pause immediately. The young prince stood perfectly still for a moment, his head tilted slightly as if he was listening to something that others couldn't hear. His usually bright expression had shifted to something more serious, more alert. Mitchell stepped closer, his hand instinctively moving toward his radio. In his line of work, any deviation from normal behavior warranted immediate attention. Prince George was typically chatty during their walks, often asking questions about Mitchell's weekend plans or sharing stories from his lessons. This sudden silence was unusual enough to raise concern. The prince's eyes moved carefully around the area, taking in details that a child his age wouldn't normally notice. His gaze lingered on the positions of other security personnel, the locations of the cameras, and the various exit points. It was as if someone had suddenly switched on a different part of his awareness, transforming him from a carefree child into someone much more observant and calculating. Mitchell felt a chill run down his spine as he watched this transformation. In his years of protecting various members of the royal family, he had learned to recognize when something was different, when the normal flow of events had been disrupted in some subtle but significant way. Prince George's behavior was triggering every instinct he had developed during his career. The young prince turned to look directly at Mitchell, and for a moment, the officer saw something in those eyes that didn't belong to a 10-year-old. There was an intensity there, a knowledge that seemed far beyond the boy's years. Prince George opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, glancing around once more before taking a step closer to his protection officer. What happened next would change Mitchell's understanding of his role and challenge everything. He thought he knew about the young royal he was sworn to protect. Prince George raised his small hand and made a gesture so subtle that anyone watching from a distance would have missed it entirely. But Mitchell, trained to notice the smallest details, caught it immediately. The gesture was not random. It was deliberate, precise, and unmistakably a signal, the kind of signal that professionals use to communicate without words, the kind that Mitchell himself had been trained to recognize and respond to during his military service. But this was coming from a child who should have no knowledge of such things. Mitchell's training kicked in automatically. His body tensed, his senses sharpened, and his mind began rapidly processing the situation. Every protocol he had learned told him to respond to the signal, to take it seriously regardless of its source. But his rational mind struggled with the reality that this sophisticated communication was coming from Prince George. The castle around them continued its normal operations, unaware that something extraordinary was unfolding in their midst. Staff members walked past, nodding respectfully to the prince and his protection officer. Cameras continued their silent surveillance. The scheduled events of the day waited to unfold. But in that moment, Mitchell realized that nothing about this day was going to be routine. Prince George maintained eye contact with Mitchell, waiting for some acknowledgement that his message had been received and understood. The boy's posture remained calm and natural to any outside observer, but Mitchell could see the tension beneath the surface. Whatever the prince was trying to communicate, it was important enough to risk breaking the normal patterns of their relationship. Mitchell found himself at a crossroads that would define not only the rest of this day, but potentially his entire career. He could dismiss what he had seen as imagination or coincidence, following the established protocols and continuing with the planned schedule. Or he could trust his instincts and respond to what every fiber of his professional experience told him was a genuine signal from someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The seconds stretched between them as Mitchell weighed his options. In the background, the sounds of the castle continued. Footsteps on marble floors, distant conversations, the gentle hum of activity that marked another day in the life of the British royal family. But for Mitchell and Prince George, time seemed suspended as they stood locked in this moment of silent communication. Finally, Mitchell made his decision. He gave an almost imperceptible nod, acknowledging that he had received and understood the prince's signal. The relief that flashed across Prince George's face confirmed that this was no game or coincidence. Something real was happening. Something that would require Mitchell to step far outside his normal duties and into territory he had never expected to navigate. Prince George's relief at Mitchell's acknowledgement was brief. Almost immediately, the young prince's expression returned to the careful mask of normalcy that he wore in public. But his eyes remained alert, constantly scanning their surroundings as they continued toward the staterooms. Mitchell noticed that the boy's walking pattern had changed subtly. He was positioning himself to stay close to walls and avoid open spaces where he might be vulnerable. As they moved through the corridor, Prince George began what appeared to be casual conversation, but Mitchell quickly realized that every word was carefully chosen. The prince asked about Mitchell's weekend plans, but embedded within his questions were references that only someone with security training would understand. He mentioned specific locations around the castle using terms that highlighted potential blind spots and defensive positions. Mitchell's amazement grew with each exchange. This was not the curious chatter of a child trying to understand his protection officer's work. This was sophisticated tactical communication disguised as innocent conversation. Prince George was systematically sharing information about potential threats and security concerns while maintaining the appearance of normal interaction. The corridor they walked through was one that Mitchell had traveled hundreds of times, but now he found himself seeing it through different eyes. Prince George's subtle guidance drew his attention to details he had previously overlooked: the sight lines from various windows, the positioning of decorative elements that could provide cover, the timing of staff movements that created patterns someone could exploit. When they reached the first checkpoint, Prince George's behavior became even more revealing. He greeted the security personnel with his usual polite warmth, but Mitchell noticed how the boy's eyes cataloged each officer's position, equipment, and alertness level. The prince was conducting his own security assessment, and from what Mitchell could observe, it was thorough and professional. During a brief pause while additional security cleared their path ahead, Prince George turned to Mitchell with what appeared to be a simple request. He asked if they could take a different route to the staterooms, claiming he wanted to show Mitchell a painting he had recently learned about in his art lessons. But the route he suggested would take them through areas with better security coverage and fewer potential ambush points. Mitchell agreed to the detour, fascinated by this glimpse into capabilities that Prince George had apparently developed far from the public eye. As they walked, the prince continued his educational commentary about various artworks, but Mitchell began to understand that these lessons served a dual purpose. Prince George had clearly used his art studies as a way to memorize the layout of the castle, learning every room, corridor, and hidden passage, under the guise of appreciating the royal collection. The painting Prince George wanted to show him was located in a smaller gallery that offered excellent visibility in all directions and multiple exit options. As they stood before the artwork, the prince began explaining its historical significance, but his real message was about the strategic value of their current location. He was teaching Mitchell about defensive positions within the castle while appearing to discuss brushwork and composition. Mitchell realized that this level of awareness and preparation didn't develop overnight. Prince George had been quietly studying, learning, and preparing for situations that might require him to take active responsibility for his own security. The question that haunted Mitchell was why. What had prompted a 10-year-old prince to develop these capabilities? And what threat was significant enough to activate them now? The answer began to emerge as they prepared to continue toward the staterooms. Prince George's demeanor shifted again, becoming more focused and urgent. He moved closer to Mitchell and, under the pretense of adjusting his jacket, whispered information that made the protection officer's blood run cold. The prince had observed unusual patterns in staff behavior over the past several days. People asking questions they normally wouldn't ask, individuals appearing in areas where they didn't belong, and subtle changes in routine that suggested someone was gathering intelligence. Mitchell's training told him to immediately alert his supervisors and initiate enhanced security protocols. But Prince George's next words stopped him cold. The prince revealed that he had already tried to report his observations through normal channels, but his concerns had been dismissed as the overactive imagination of a child who watched too many spy movies. The adults around him had patted his head and assured him that the castle's security was perfectly adequate. This revelation explained why Prince George had resorted to direct communication with Mitchell. The young prince had recognized that his protection officer was someone who would take his concerns seriously, someone with the training to understand the significance of what he had observed. Prince George had essentially recruited Mitchell as his ally in addressing a threat that others refused to acknowledge. As they stood in the gallery, Mitchell felt the weight of an impossible decision. His duty was to follow established protocols and trust the security systems that had protected the royal family for generations. But every instinct he had developed during his military and law enforcement career told him that Prince George's concerns were legitimate and that dismissing them could lead to catastrophic consequences. The prince seemed to sense Mitchell's internal struggle. With the patience of someone much older than his years, he began providing additional details about his observations. He described specific individuals who had exhibited suspicious behavior, timing patterns that suggested surveillance, and conversations he had overheard that contained veiled references to the day's scheduled events. Mitchell listened with growing alarm as Prince George painted a picture of coordinated activity that had been building over several days. The prince had been conducting his own investigation, using his access to different areas of the castle and his ability to move unnoticed among the staff to gather intelligence that the official security apparatus had missed. The most disturbing revelation came when Prince George described overhearing a phone conversation in which someone had referenced the morning window and the photo opportunity. These phrases, combined with the other evidence the prince had gathered, suggested that someone was planning to exploit the day's scheduled photo session with visiting dignitaries. Mitchell's mind raced as he processed this information. The photo session was scheduled to take place in less than an hour, and if Prince George's intelligence was accurate, they were walking directly into a carefully planned trap. The question was whether Mitchell was prepared to act on the word of a 10-year-old prince, even one who had demonstrated remarkable awareness and capabilities. Prince George seemed to read his thoughts. The young prince looked directly at Mitchell and spoke with a gravity that belonged to someone who understood the stakes involved. He wasn't asking Mitchell to believe him blindly. He was asking his protection officer to investigate, to use his own skills and resources to verify the intelligence before it was too late to act. Mitchell made his decision in that moment, choosing to trust both his instincts and the remarkable young prince standing before him. He activated his earpiece and requested a private conversation with his team leader, using a code phrase that would signal the need for immediate but discreet consultation. Within minutes, Senior Protection Officer Sarah Chen arrived at their location, her expression professional but curious about the unusual request. Prince George observed Chen's arrival with the same careful attention he had shown throughout the morning. Mitchell noticed that the prince seemed to approve of Chen's inclusion, suggesting that his assessment of personnel extended beyond just his primary protection officer. When Chen approached, Prince George greeted her with his usual politeness, but Mitchell caught the subtle glance the prince gave him, a signal that he was ready to share his intelligence with this trusted member of the security team. Mitchell began by explaining his concerns in general terms, watching Chen's reaction carefully. As a senior officer with 15 years of experience protecting the royal family, Chen had developed her own instincts about potential threats. When Mitchell mentioned the unusual patterns that had been observed, Chen's expression shifted to one of heightened attention. She had noticed some irregularities herself but hadn't yet connected them into a coherent picture. Prince George then stepped forward and, with remarkable composure for a 10-year-old, began providing detailed information about his observations. He spoke clearly and systematically, presenting his intelligence in a way that demonstrated both his understanding of security protocols and his ability to analyze complex situations. Chen listened with growing amazement as the young prince outlined patterns of behavior that painted a disturbing picture of coordinated surveillance and preparation. The prince described how he had noticed the same individual in 3 different areas of the castle over the past 2 days, each time with plausible reasons for being there, but without the usual escort procedures that applied to non-essential personnel. He had observed conversations that stopped abruptly when he approached, phone calls made from locations where cellular coverage was normally poor, and equipment being moved through areas where it didn't belong. Chen's training kicked in as she processed this information. She began asking Prince George specific questions about timing, locations, and individuals, treating him as she would any reliable intelligence source. The prince answered each question with precision, providing details that demonstrated not only excellent observation skills, but also an understanding of their significance within the broader security framework. As they talked, Mitchell monitored their surroundings, noting that the usual morning activity in the castle continued around them. Staff members moved through the corridors with their normal efficiency, unaware that a potential crisis was being analyzed just a few feet away. The contrast between the apparent normalcy and the growing evidence of a threat created an surreal atmosphere that put Mitchell's nerves on edge. Chen's questioning revealed additional concerns that Prince George had identified. The prince had noticed that several of the visiting dignitaries' advanced team members had requested access to areas beyond what was necessary for their security preparations. They had asked detailed questions about the castle's layout, emergency procedures, and staff schedules that seemed excessive for a routine photo opportunity. The most alarming discovery came when Prince George described overhearing a conversation between 2 individuals who spoke in what he recognized as coded language. His language tutors had taught him to identify different linguistic patterns, and he had noticed that these individuals used specific phrases and references that seemed designed to convey hidden meanings. When he repeated some of these phrases to Chen, she immediately recognized them as terminology used in operational planning. Chen's experience told her that they were dealing with a sophisticated threat that had been carefully planned and professionally executed. The level of preparation and intelligence gathering that Prince George had observed suggested that this was not the work of amateurs or opportunists. Someone with extensive knowledge of royal security procedures was orchestrating an operation designed to exploit the vulnerabilities created by the morning's scheduled events. The timeline was becoming critical. The photo session was scheduled to begin in 30 minutes, and if the threat was real, the security window for preventing it was rapidly closing. Chen made the decision to escalate the situation while maintaining operational security. She contacted her supervisor using encrypted communication channels, requesting an immediate security assessment without revealing the source of their intelligence. While Chen coordinated with the Security Command Center, Mitchell continued his conversation with Prince George. The young prince revealed that he had developed contingency plans for various scenarios, having studied the castle's emergency procedures and evacuation routes. His preparation extended beyond observation and analysis. He had actually rehearsed responses to different types of threats. Prince George explained that his interest in these matters had developed gradually, beginning with curiosity about his protection officer's work and expanding into serious study when he realized how much responsibility he would eventually carry. He had used his access to the castle's library and his private tutors to learn about security principles, threat assessment, and crisis management. What had started as intellectual curiosity had evolved into practical preparation. The prince's revelation about his self-directed education explained much about his current capabilities, but it also raised new questions about what had motivated such intense preparation. Mitchell began to understand that Prince George's awareness of potential threats extended beyond the current situation. The young prince had recognized that his position would make him a target throughout his life, and he had chosen to prepare himself rather than rely entirely on others for his protection. Chen returned with updates from the Security Command Center. Her supervisor had authorized a discreet review of the day's arrangements, focusing on the personnel and procedures that Prince George had identified as concerning. Initial checks had revealed several irregularities that warranted further investigation, lending credibility to the prince's intelligence and validating their decision to take his observations seriously. The security review had uncovered that 3 individuals with access to the photo session area had backgrounds that didn't fully check out under enhanced scrutiny. Their credentials were legitimate but recently issued, and their employment histories contained gaps that hadn't been noticed during the standard vetting process. Additionally, equipment that shouldn't have been present in certain areas had been detected during a sweep triggered by Prince George's observations. As the evidence mounted, Mitchell realized that they were dealing with a threat that could have gone undetected until it was too late to prevent. Prince George's vigilance and courage in reporting his concerns had potentially saved not only his own life, but the lives of everyone involved in the morning's events. The young prince had proven that age and position didn't limit one's ability to contribute to security when properly trained and motivated. With confirmation that the threat was real, Chen initiated enhanced security protocols while maintaining the appearance of normal operations. The challenge now was to neutralize the threat without alerting the perpetrators that their operation had been discovered. Prince George's intelligence had given them the advantage of awareness, but translating that advantage into effective action would require careful coordination and precise timing. The Security Command Center became a hub of controlled activity, as Chen's supervisor, Commander David Walsh, coordinated the response to Prince George's intelligence. Walsh had 30 years of experience in royal protection, and he recognized the signs of a sophisticated operation when he saw them. The evidence that Prince George had gathered painted a picture of a threat that had been months in the planning, designed to exploit the predictable routines and security assumptions that governed royal events. Walsh made the decision to implement what he called a silent lockdown, enhanced security measures that would be invisible to anyone not directly involved in the protection operation. Additional personnel were quietly positioned throughout the castle. Surveillance systems were elevated to maximum sensitivity, and emergency response teams were placed on standby. All of this happened without any visible change to the morning's scheduled activities. Meanwhile, Prince George continued to demonstrate his remarkable understanding of operational security. He maintained his normal demeanor and schedule while providing Mitchell and Chen with ongoing intelligence updates. The prince had positioned himself to observe the areas where he had noticed suspicious activity, using his legitimate presence in these locations to monitor the threat without raising suspicion. The young prince's ability to operate effectively in this environment impressed even the most experienced security professionals. He understood instinctively that his greatest advantage lay in the fact that no one would suspect a 10-year-old of conducting counter-surveillance operations. His innocent appearance and natural access to all areas of the castle made him an ideal intelligence asset. Though Walsh was careful to ensure that Prince George was never placed in direct danger, as the investigation progressed, the scope of the threat became clearer. The security team discovered that the suspicious individuals had been gathering information not just about the morning's photo session, but about the castle's entire security infrastructure. They had mapped guard rotations, identified communication protocols, and studied the response procedures for various types of emergencies. This was not a simple assassination attempt. It was a comprehensive intelligence operation with objectives that extended far beyond a single event. Prince George's continued observations revealed additional details about the perpetrators' plans. He noticed that certain individuals were positioning themselves in locations that would allow them to observe and potentially interfere with security communications during the photo session. Others were placing equipment in areas where it could disrupt the castle's internal systems or create diversions that would complicate any emergency response. The most concerning discovery came when Prince George reported observing one of the suspicious individuals near the communication center. The prince had been visiting the castle's technical areas as part of his education about the facility's operations, and he recognized that the individual was attempting to gain access to systems that could compromise the entire security network. This revelation prompted Walsh to order an immediate but discreet inspection of all critical infrastructure. The technical inspection revealed that several communication nodes had been subtly modified with devices designed to intercept and potentially jam security transmissions. The modifications were sophisticated and nearly invisible, suggesting that the perpetrators had access to advanced equipment and expertise. Without Prince George's alert observations, these compromises might not have been discovered until they were activated during the actual Operation Chen, coordinated with Mitchell to ensure that Prince George remained safe while continuing to provide valuable intelligence. They developed a system of subtle signals that allowed the prince to communicate his observations without drawing attention from anyone who might be monitoring his behavior. The young prince adapted to these protocols quickly, demonstrating an intuitive understanding of operational security that impressed his protection officers. As the morning progressed, the security team began to understand that they were dealing with a threat that operated on multiple levels. The photo session was likely just one component of a larger operation designed to gather intelligence, test response capabilities, and potentially carry out objectives that wouldn't become clear until the operation was in progress. Prince George's intervention had given them the opportunity to observe and understand the threat. Before it fully activated, the decision was made to allow the operation to proceed under carefully controlled conditions, rather than simply canceling the photo session and alerting the perpetrators that their plan had been discovered. Walsh chose to use the event as an opportunity to identify all members of the network and understand their complete objectives. Prince George's intelligence had given them the advantage of awareness, and they intended to use that advantage to neutralize the entire threat. Prince George was briefed on this decision and his role in the controlled operation. The young prince would maintain his normal participation in the photo session while being surrounded by enhanced but invisible security. His job was to continue observing and reporting while allowing the perpetrators to believe their operation was proceeding undetected. It was a delicate balance that required Prince George to act naturally while remaining vigilant for any signs that the situation was escalating beyond their control. The preparation for this controlled operation revealed additional aspects of Prince George's remarkable capabilities. The prince worked with the security team to identify optimal positions for covert personnel and suggested modifications to the photo session setup that would provide better security coverage without appearing unusual. His insights into the castle's layout and the logistics of royal events proved invaluable in planning the response. As they prepared to implement their plan, Mitchell reflected on how dramatically his understanding of his role had evolved over the course of a single morning. He had begun the day expecting to provide routine protection for a 10-year-old prince during a simple photo opportunity. Now he was coordinating a counterintelligence operation with that same prince serving as a key intelligence asset and strategic planner. Prince George's transformation from protected child to active participant in his own security had implications that extended far beyond the current crisis. The young prince had demonstrated capabilities that would serve him throughout his life. But more importantly, he had shown the courage and wisdom to use those capabilities when circumstances demanded action. Mitchell realized that he was witnessing the emergence of a future leader who would bring unique strengths to his eventual role. The final preparations were completed as the time for the photo session approached. Everyone involved understood that the next hour would test not only their operational capabilities, but also their ability to work with a 10-year-old partner whose intelligence and composure had made their response possible. Prince George stood ready to play his part in an operation that would determine whether a sophisticated threat could be neutralized before it achieved its objectives. The stakes were higher than anyone outside the security team realized, but Prince George seemed to understand the weight of responsibility he carried. As they moved toward the staterooms where the photo session would take place, the young prince maintained the perfect balance of alertness and normalcy that the situation required. Mitchell knew that the next phase of their operation would depend heavily on Prince George's continued performance under pressure. The stateroom had been transformed into what appeared to be a typical setup for a royal photo session, but Mitchell knew that every detail had been carefully planned to support their counter-operation. Hidden among the photographers and staff were additional security personnel, while advanced surveillance equipment monitored every corner of the room. Prince George entered the space with his usual composed demeanor, greeting the visiting dignitaries with the polished courtesy that had been instilled in him since childhood. As the photo session began, Prince George demonstrated his ability to operate on multiple levels simultaneously. To the dignitaries and their staff, He appeared to be simply a well-mannered young prince participating in a routine royal engagement. But Mitchell could see the subtle signs that Prince George was conducting his own surveillance of everyone present, cataloging faces, positions, and behaviors that might indicate threat activity. The visiting delegation included several individuals that Prince George had identified as suspicious during his earlier observations. The prince managed to position himself in ways that allowed him to observe these individuals while appearing to focus on the photography session. His natural movement and conversation provided cover for intelligence gathering that would have been impossible for adult security personnel to conduct so openly. During a brief pause in the photography, Prince George made casual conversation with one of the dignitaries' staff members who had been flagged as suspicious. To anyone listening, it seemed like innocent curiosity from a young prince asking about the visitor's country and culture. But Mitchell recognized that Prince George was systematically probing for information about the individual's background and purpose, using questions that would reveal inconsistencies in their cover story. The responses confirmed Prince George's suspicions. The individual claimed to be from a specific region, but lacked knowledge of basic cultural details that any native would know. More concerning, their answers revealed familiarity with aspects of royal protocol and castle operations that wouldn't be necessary for their stated role in the delegation. Prince George's subtle interrogation had exposed them as someone operating under false pretenses. As the session continued, Prince George used hand signals to communicate his findings to Mitchell and Chen, who were positioned among the security personnel surrounding the room. The young prince had identified 3 individuals whose behavior and responses marked them as likely operatives rather than legitimate delegation members. His assessment matched the security team's own observations, confirming that they were dealing with a coordinated infiltration. The breakthrough came when Prince George noticed one of the suspicious individuals attempting to access a restricted area during a moment when attention was focused on the photography. The prince smoothly excused himself from the group, ostensibly to retrieve something from an adjacent room, but actually to follow and observe the individual's actions. What he discovered validated their worst fears about the scope of the threat. Prince George observed the individual placing a small device near the communication equipment that controlled the castle's emergency systems. The device was designed to appear like routine technical equipment, but the prince recognized it as something that didn't belong in that location. His quick thinking and familiarity with the castle's systems allowed him to identify this sabotage attempt before it could be completed. Using the communication protocols they had established, Prince George immediately alerted Mitchell to the situation. The protection officer smoothly moved to intercept the individual, while Prince George returned to the photo session, maintaining his cover while the security response unfolded around him. The young prince's ability to identify and report the threat without compromising the operation demonstrated operational skills that impressed even the most experienced security professionals. The individual's attempt to sabotage the communication system revealed the true scope of their operation. They weren't simply planning an attack during the photo session. They were preparing to disable the castle's ability to respond to any emergency, leaving the entire facility vulnerable to whatever they had planned for later. Prince George's intervention had prevented a security compromise that could have had catastrophic consequences. As Mitchell and the security team moved to neutralize the immediate threat, Prince George continued his role in the photo session while monitoring the reactions of the other suspicious individuals. The young prince's ability to maintain his cover while observing their responses provided valuable intelligence about the extent of the network and their coordination methods. The other operatives' behavior confirmed that this was a sophisticated group with extensive preparation and backup plans. When their colleague failed to return from his sabotage mission, they began implementing what appeared to be contingency procedures. Prince George observed subtle changes in their positioning and communication that suggested they were preparing to activate an alternative plan. Chen coordinated the response to these developing threats while maintaining the appearance of normal security operations. The challenge was to neutralize the entire network without alerting any external accomplices who might be monitoring the situation. Prince George's continued observations were crucial in identifying all the hostile actors and understanding their capabilities. The young prince's Performance under pressure had exceeded everyone's expectations. Not only had he identified the initial threat and provided the intelligence necessary to understand its scope, but he was now actively participating in the operation to neutralize it. His natural access to all areas of the event and his ability to interact with everyone present made him an invaluable asset in the security response. As the photo session neared its conclusion, Prince George had helped identify a total of 5 individuals who were operating under false pretenses within the delegation. His observations had revealed 3 separate sabotage attempts and provided intelligence about communication methods and escape routes that the perpetrators had prepared. The young prince's contribution to the operation had transformed what could have been a security disaster into a controlled counterintelligence success. The final phase of the operation required Prince George to maintain his cover while the security team moved to simultaneously apprehend all identified threats. The timing had to be perfect to prevent any of the operatives from escaping or activating contingency plans that could still cause harm. Prince George's role was to continue acting normally while being ready to respond to any unexpected developments. Mitchell watched with admiration as Prince George prepared for this critical moment. The 10-year-old prince showed no signs of nervousness or uncertainty, despite being at the center of an operation that would determine the safety of everyone in the castle. His composure and professionalism rivaled that of experienced operatives, demonstrating that his remarkable capabilities extended beyond intelligence gathering to include performance under extreme pressure. The success of their operation would depend not only on the security team's execution, but also on Prince George's ability to maintain his role until the very end. As they prepared to spring their trap, Mitchell realized that they were witnessing something unprecedented. A young royal who had not only identified a major security threat, but had actively participated in the operation to neutralize it. The moment of action arrived with perfect synchronization. Commander Walsh gave the signal, and security personnel throughout the stateroom moved simultaneously to apprehend the identified operatives. Prince George continued his conversation with a dignitary, as if nothing unusual was happening. But Mitchell could see the young prince's alert eyes tracking each arrest as it unfolded around him. The first operative was taken into custody near the communication equipment, caught with the sabotage device still in his possession. 2 others were apprehended while attempting to access restricted areas, their false credentials exposed under enhanced scrutiny. The remaining suspects were surrounded and detained before they could activate any contingency plans or attempt to escape from the castle grounds. Prince George's performance during these critical moments was flawless. He maintained his role as an innocent participant in the photo session while the security operation unfolded around him. When one of the dignitaries expressed confusion about the sudden security activity, Prince George smoothly redirected the conversation, suggesting that it was probably just a routine security drill that occasionally interrupted castle operations. The young prince's quick thinking and natural charisma helped maintain the cover story that prevented panic among the legitimate delegation members. His ability to project calm confidence during the arrests reassured everyone present that the situation was under control, even though most of them didn't understand what was actually happening. As the last of the operatives was taken into custody, Mitchell felt a profound sense of relief mixed with amazement at what they had accomplished. Prince George's intelligence and courage had prevented what could have been a catastrophic security breach. The young prince had not only identified the threat, but had actively participated in neutralizing it, demonstrating capabilities that would serve him throughout his life. Chen coordinated the post-operation activities while Prince George concluded the photo session with perfect royal protocol. The young prince graciously thanked the legitimate delegation members for their visit, posed for the remaining photographs, and bid them farewell, as if the morning had proceeded exactly as planned. His performance ensured that the diplomatic purposes of the event were fulfilled, despite the security crisis that had unfolded behind the scenes. The interrogation of the captured operatives began immediately, with Prince George's intelligence providing crucial context for understanding their mission and objectives. The devices and equipment they had attempted to install were analyzed by technical experts, revealing a sophisticated plan to compromise multiple castle systems simultaneously. The operation had been designed to create vulnerabilities that could be exploited during future events, making Prince George's intervention even more significant initial. Questioning revealed that the operatives represented a network with extensive knowledge of royal security procedures and access to advanced technical equipment. Their plan had been months in development, with careful study of castle operations and security protocols. Without Prince George's vigilant observations, they might have succeeded in establishing permanent access to critical systems. The young prince participated in the debriefing sessions, providing additional details about his observations and helping security analysts understand the full scope of what had been attempted. His memory for specific conversations, timing, and behavioral patterns proved invaluable in reconstructing the operatives' activities and identifying any aspects of their plan that might not have been fully neutralized. Prince George's insights also helped the security team understand how the operatives had gained access to sensitive information about castle operations. His observations about staff behavior and communication patterns revealed security vulnerabilities that needed to be addressed to prevent similar infiltrations in the future. The young prince's analysis contributed to significant improvements in royal protection protocols. As the immediate crisis concluded, Mitchell began to process the implications of what had occurred. Prince George had demonstrated capabilities that fundamentally changed how his protection would need to be approached in the future. The young prince was no longer simply a protectee who needed to be shielded from threats. He was a potential partner in his own security who could contribute intelligence and strategic insights. The relationship between Prince George and his protection team had evolved during the crisis into something unprecedented in royal security. The traditional model of passive protection had been replaced by active collaboration, with the prince serving as both an intelligence asset and a strategic participant in security operations. This transformation would require new protocols and training for everyone involved in royal protection. Commander Walsh convened a special review session to analyze the operation and its implications for future security planning. Prince George was included in these discussions as a full participant, his contributions valued alongside those of the most experienced security professionals. The young prince's perspectives on castle operations and potential vulnerabilities provided insights that adult professionals might have missed. The review revealed that Prince George's self-directed education in security matters had been more comprehensive than anyone had realized. His understanding of threat assessment, operational planning, and crisis management rivaled that of trained professionals. This knowledge, combined with his unique access and position, made him an invaluable asset for royal security operations. The success of the operation also highlighted the importance of taking seriously intelligence from unexpected sources. Prince George's initial concerns had been dismissed by some as childish imagination, nearly allowing a sophisticated threat to succeed. The security team implemented new protocols to ensure that all threat reports would be properly evaluated, regardless of their source. As the day concluded, Prince George reflected on the morning's events with a maturity that belied his age. He understood that his intervention had prevented serious harm and possibly saved lives, but he also recognized that his actions had revealed capabilities that would change his relationship with the security apparatus that surrounded him. The young prince seemed prepared for these changes and ready to embrace his evolving role. Mitchell realized that his own role had been permanently transformed as well. He was no longer simply protecting a young prince. He was working with a partner who brought unique capabilities to their shared mission of ensuring royal security. The trust and communication that had developed between them during the crisis would form the foundation for a new approach to royal protection. The implications of Prince George's performance extended beyond immediate security, concerns to questions about his future preparation and training. The young prince had demonstrated that he possessed both the aptitude and the motivation for advanced security education, suggesting that formal training might be appropriate as he continued to develop these remarkable capabilities. As they walked through the castle corridors at the end of this extraordinary day, Mitchell and Prince George had established a partnership that would influence royal security for years to come. The young prince had proven that age and tradition need not limit one's ability to contribute to protecting what matters most. and his example would inspire new approaches to royal protection in an evolving world. 3 weeks after the operation, Prince George sat in Commander Walsh's office for what had become a regular weekly briefing session. The young prince had been formally included in certain aspects of security planning, his unique perspective and capabilities now recognized as valuable assets in protecting the royal family. The traditional boundaries between protector and protected had been redefined to accommodate a new model of collaborative security. Mitchell observed these briefings with continued amazement at Prince George's development. The young prince approached security discussions with the same seriousness he brought to his academic studies, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights that often surprised even experienced professionals. His natural curiosity had evolved into sophisticated, analytical thinking that contributed meaningfully to security assessments. The investigation into the infiltration network had revealed connections to larger international threats, validating Prince George's instinct that the photo session incident was part of something much more significant. The intelligence gathered during the operation had helped authorities identify and neutralize related threats in other locations, demonstrating that the young prince's intervention had implications far beyond Windsor Castle. Prince George's role in these broader security matters remained carefully managed to ensure his safety while maximizing the value of his contributions. He participated in intelligence analysis and planning sessions but was kept away from operational activities that might expose him to direct danger. The balance between utilizing his capabilities and protecting his well-being required constant attention from his security team. The changes in Prince George's routine had been subtle but significant. His education now included formal instruction in security principles, threat assessment, and crisis management, subjects that complemented his existing studies in history, languages, and diplomacy. The young prince approached these new subjects with the same dedication he showed in all his academic pursuits, quickly mastering concepts that would serve him throughout his life. Mitchell's relationship with Prince George had evolved into something resembling a mentorship, with the protection officer providing guidance on security matters while learning from the prince's unique perspectives on royal life and protocols. Their daily interactions included informal briefings and discussions that kept both of them informed about potential concerns and developing situations. The success of their collaboration had influenced security procedures for other members of the royal family as well. Prince George's siblings began receiving enhanced education about security awareness, though none showed the same natural aptitude that had made their brother so valuable as a security partner. The royal family's approach to protection was evolving to include more active participation from its members. Chen had been promoted to lead a new unit focused on developing innovative approaches to royal protection, with Prince George serving as an informal consultant on procedures and protocols. The young prince's insights into the daily routines and challenges of royal life helped security professionals understand vulnerabilities that might not be apparent to outside observers. The castle itself had undergone significant security upgrades based on vulnerabilities that Prince George had identified during his informal surveys. His intimate knowledge of the facility's layout and operations had revealed potential weaknesses that had existed for years without being recognized by traditional security assessments. The improvements enhanced protection for all royal family members and staff. Prince George's academic performance had not suffered despite his additional security responsibilities. If anything, his engagement with real-world applications of strategic thinking and analysis had enhanced his overall learning, providing practical context for subjects like history, politics, and international relations. His tutors noted increased focus and maturity in his approach to all subjects. The international security community had taken notice of the innovative approaches being developed within royal protection services, though the specific details of Prince George's contributions remained classified. The young prince's role in identifying and neutralizing the infiltration network had become a case study in the value of comprehensive security awareness and the importance of considering intelligence from all sources. As Prince George continued to develop his capabilities, discussions began about his future training and preparation for the responsibilities he would eventually inherit. His demonstrated abilities suggested that he might bring unique strengths to his eventual role, combining traditional royal duties with modern security awareness and strategic thinking. The young prince's perspective on his own development remained remarkably balanced. He understood the significance of his contributions to security matters, but didn't allow this recognition to interfere with his normal childhood activities and interests. Prince George continued to enjoy typical pursuits like sports, music, and time with friends, maintaining the balanced development that would serve him well in future leadership roles. Mitchell often reflected on how dramatically his understanding of royal protection had changed. Since that morning when Prince George first made his subtle signal, the traditional model of passive protection had given way to active collaboration, with security and royal family members working together to address evolving threats in an increasingly complex world. The bond between Prince George and his protection team had become a model for how security relationships might evolve to meet modern challenges. Trust, communication, and mutual respect had replaced the formal distance that had traditionally characterized these interactions, creating more effective protection while preserving the dignity and autonomy that royal family members required. As they walked through the castle corridors during their daily routine, Mitchell and Prince George continued to maintain the subtle communication systems they had developed during the crisis. The young prince's ongoing observations contributed to a comprehensive security awareness that helped prevent potential threats before they could develop into serious dangers. The transformation that had begun with a 10-year-old prince's courage in reporting his concerns had rippled through the entire royal protection establishment, inspiring new approaches to security that would influence operations for generations to come. Prince George had proven that effective protection required not just professional expertise, but also the active participation of those being protected. Looking toward the future, Mitchell knew that Prince George would continue to develop capabilities that would serve him throughout his life. The young prince had demonstrated that leadership could begin early, that responsibility could be shared across traditional boundaries, and that the most effective security came from partnerships built on trust, communication, and mutual respect. The signal that had frozen Mitchell in his tracks that morning had ultimately transformed not just a single day, but the entire approach to protecting those who would one day lead the nation.